It's just amazing if you think about it, just even in the last 24 months, how many people have had even a discussion about ChatGPT before that and how that's had a discussion that's evolved greatly. And when you're thinking about your equipment and how the use of AI can interface with it, if the area that you have strong capabilities in software, bringing your hardware there so that teams can work on the two together, it's actually easier to bring the hardware to a country where you have deep AI and software capabilities than it is the other way around. But the real value over time is this combination of advanced R&D and capabilities together. And I think that's one of the unique opportunities for India.
Hi, wherever you're joining us from, I hope you're doing well. Welcome to Tech Conversations, where we bring you insights from tech entrepreneurs, CXOs, and investors. I'm Hari Arakali, and today I bring you another episode of The Big Picture, conversations with leaders at some of the world's biggest tech companies. In this episode, Peter Arduini, President and CEO of GE HealthCare Technologies, talks about his plan to expand R&D and manufacturing in India. The multinational company has committed to investing $1 billion in expanding these capabilities via its local joint venture, Wipro GE HealthCare, a partnership that's endured over more than 3 decades. Peter also talks about how India is uniquely positioned to take ownership of more GE healthcare product development because of its software prowess and growing applied AI capabilities. So welcome again to Bangalore, Peter. Maybe in the pre-COVID days, you must have come to India.
I was more in Hyderabad and Delhi just before COVID, but I was saying my first trip to Bangalore was 1995.
Okay.
So I started my career with GE back in 1990 through 2005, and then I left for many years,
right.
And then came back. And
right.
So this is my first trip back to Bangalore since 2005 or 6. Yeah.
And overall, does anything strike you as different?
What struck me with our team is just the technology evolution of what we're doing. When it was basic ultrasound work back then, and now we're doing some of our most sophisticated PET-CT molecular imaging products here. And my chief technology officer is traveling with me. And so for artificial intelligence, some of the more sophisticated foundational model work we're doing anywhere in the world, we're doing here.
What stands out in your mind when you think about the most important initiatives across GE Healthcare over the last 15 odd months since you've become an independent listed company?
At a global level,
yes,
you'd say.
Yes.
Yeah, well, look, obviously separating out of one of the most iconic companies in the world is a job within itself. And so the first year of setting up your own focused board, the investors that followed GE aren't necessarily the same investors that follow GE HealthCare. So, getting to know and do that, building the team up, getting the operating and management system in place, there's been lots of things. But, I come from an R&D background, from an investment standpoint. So one of the goals up front was to really kind of get the processes in place for driving more innovation. And, I would say over the last few years, prior to our split, we had always been investing, but maybe not at the same level. We last year invested at over roughly 20% of our sales within R&D. So that's an important aspect, getting our, what we would say, inorganic or M&A capabilities set up. And so we've done about 3 deals since we've spun out. We'll continue to do more of those things. And then there's just some really exciting things happening on the data side, as you know, in just so many areas. And so I think Taha is a great example of recruiting him to the organization. He was the head of artificial intelligence at AWS and Amazon, but he's also an interventional cardiologist who trained at Harvard, and he's a data stats guy. And so he's kind of the trifecta, if you will, of capabilities. And so with that, we've been able to build out a large team here in Washington and Seattle, and also capabilities in San Francisco. So that's what we've been focused on, and a lot of exciting things going on in the space in different markets around the world, particularly for what we do.
And as an independent company, briefly, do you feel that all these things can be done faster, more efficiently, more effectively.
Yeah, no, I think, look, one of our cultural principles that we laid out for our own is entrepreneurship. And a big part of that is to be more agile and faster. Having your own balance sheet that you can control and being able to move quickly on decisions is something that we're very focused on. And, in a case here, such as like in India with our organizational structure, is to be able to put more of the capabilities to make the decisions local here is important. I'm sure as you've talked to many folks, COVID taught us a lot of different lessons, good and bad, but relative to having resiliency and integrated supply chains is a very important aspect, I think, of the future of where healthcare is going to go, but particularly med tech.
Yeah. Can you give us a feel for the future GE HealthCare? I mean, you want to make the company a broader medical technologies company around precision care using AI and so on, and not so much a medical devices company. So walk us through your vision of this future GE HealthCare.
Yeah, no, it's a good look. We lay out this purpose about creating a world where healthcare has no limits. We know there's many. And so choosing those limits by definition means that you need to think more longitudinally, not just we're a diagnostic imaging company or we're in anesthesia, but if we want to solve prostate cancer or we want to dig into deeper areas, one needs to think broadly. And that takes you into new areas. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to acquire all those, but it changes your mindset about partnerships in the ecosystem. And this idea of precision care, as you brought up, is really brought in three different areas. One is all of our devices and our drugs that we make for diagnostics are smarter, or they work together in different ways. This idea of framing them around how a patient journey goes and how data flows is important. And then obviously the use of digital and cloud-based computing, but the big piece there is artificial intelligence. So, I just give you an example. I mean, we manufacture here a significant amount of ultrasound. We do lots of types of work. Handheld ultrasound is a great example. I think you might have spoke to our head of ultrasound maybe in the past meetings. The handheld ultrasound has the capability of what the biggest system we made maybe 8 years ago. And if you play that forward with AI, the ability to have clinicians that have never used ultrasound before or was too difficult to use it. Think about if you went to your primary care doctor, instead of just listening with a stethoscope, they actually can see into the body how that transforms care. I mean, that's microdization, that's actually technology enablement, it's cloud computing, and it's also AI as an example. On the other side of things, there's just a significant amount of things evolving in drug device combination. So this rise of radiopharmaceuticals, the idea of products called theranostics, where you can actually deliver a radioactive dose in a molecule directly to the tumor via medicine that doesn't affect good cells, but only the challenging cells. We will play a pretty significant role in that, from how you make many of the agents, how you image those agents, and then how you actually integrate that in all the data across the disease state. So those are some of the big areas that are out there. And so areas that we can add and fill in a broader area within cardiology, neurology, oncology, even areas within orthopedics, we're going to take a hard look at.
So with this in the backdrop, can you give us a sense of your plan for what you'd like your colleagues in India to work on?
Yeah, so look, I think the first part is that within India and for India, with the rise of better insurance programs and the increase in health across the countries, it's about bringing a lot of our technologies to many of these markets. So if 1.4 billion population, there's so much opportunity between what one can do. And many of the products that we make, either ultrasound, CT, MR, you get into other parts within monitoring, are some of the first critical things one needs to do to bring higher quality care. And so making those products here versus maybe making them in a nearby country or shipping them around the world is really a first step that's important. And I think what's exciting for me as I come back to see is how more of the secondary and third tier electromechanical supply base is beginning to build up in India. We need more, and I think some of the changes that have taken place administratively have helped that. But I think that's going to be quite important. The other area then is this idea of in India for the world, and we've already been doing software development here for many years. As obviously Bangalore is known here as this great capability. But when you think about where we're going with artificial intelligence, in many cases it's linked directly with the product. So the more we have certain products here, the more actually that full system integration and development will take place. And I mentioned the last one, which is the days of when you could have single source countries or single source products. If COVID taught us anything, it's just not a practice that's sustainable. And so having more of a distributed capability is something we're looking at. And again, you wouldn't do this in every country, but in a world where India is on track to be the third largest economy in the world, it deserves to have the capabilities to do complete capabilities. And we've been here for over 35 years. And I think as far as having the infrastructure and capability to do it, I feel very good about doing that in India.
Can you walk us through some of the nuances, maybe the next level of detail in terms of where does sort of India figure in terms of your strategy for your global operations?
Yeah, so it's always been an important aspect. I mean, so if I think of India, China, and Mexico and for GE HealthCare have always been three major big, I'd say, exporters of manufacturing capabilities and build. And then the United States and Western Europe have played significant roles as well. But as far as being able to have better cost and how that's evolved into innovation as well, I would say India is probably high on the list, if not on the top of the list, because of the software capabilities. It's just amazing if you think about it, just even in the last 24 months, how many people have had even a discussion about ChatGPT before that, and how that's had a discussion that's evolved greatly. And when you're thinking about your equipment and how the use of AI can interface with it, if the area that you have strong capabilities in software, bringing your hardware there so that teams can work on the two together, it's actually easier to bring the hardware to a country where you have deep AI and software capabilities than it is the other way around. So I think there's a convergence of capabilities, and then there's a comfort, I would say, because we have 4 different manufacturing locations. We've been here. We have great leadership in the area. All of those things are important, how you choose. The days when what's the cheapest labor and what's the content really don't come into play near they did maybe 20 years ago. I mean, most of our content of how you make a product is much lower than the components. So you want to be able to find local manufacturing for those components. But the real value over time is this combination of advanced R&D and capabilities together. And I think that's one of the unique opportunities for India. And again, it's very important as well that we're in a marketplace that's going to continue to grow with a very large population that has a high priority to receive care.
As of now, as of today, India is probably relatively a small market in your global scheme of things. That said, it's also a market that offers you a billion-person population opportunity to test out your theses and experiment in terms of your, solutions that could bring together AI and scale and how you would make it more affordable. And as you know, in fintech, we've had some success in terms of what we call our digital public infrastructure. So I'm just thinking how you would approach it.
This is the tech stack.
The whole India tech stack and so on. And a lot of people are hoping that we can repeat that kind of a success in healthcare. So I'm just wondering how you would view GE HealthCare's role in that broader ecosystem.
Well, I think how this is. It tends to be a flywheel effect, right? If you have the right type of government incentives or environment, from tax to logistics to capabilities, one starts bringing more companies, into a given area. I think this idea, particularly for electromechanical devices and electronics, to be able to have more fab and electronic capabilities. But that comes with the commitment of a stable investment profile from the government that says we're going to see things for many years to come this way. You start seeing the conversion of, either be federal direct investment, and we're seeing that now. So I think all the right things are in place. And for a company like us, it is about now taking designs that we know how to make here unbelievably well, but the components, maybe 70% of them came from someplace else. And now starting to actually work with suppliers to help ramp them up and then go deeper. And so that in many cases is our strategy as well as other companies' strategies in the space. And I would say many of the peer companies that are in the ecosystem, many of them are global med tech companies, are looking at the same thing and saying how many different areas can you actually set up for an integrated supply chain structure where you're not, say, maybe dedicated just to one country. And I think, again, India, because of many factors, but particularly government, tech, and then an environment that is open to actually working with businesses is a very much positive for the country.
You mentioned M&A earlier on. Do you see any opportunities in India? Probably small companies, but with very interesting technologies, maybe software or in some very niche areas, even in hardware-centric software.
Yeah, so I would say it's interesting. We are really starting to take a look at more on a global scale, different players that way. And particularly, as you mentioned, in software, the beauty of software and the way much of the coding takes place, it democratizes, if you will, many of these different ideas. I'd say to start, it's more around partnerships as we find different areas. But one of the things that we've started up is our own investment fund within the company. And so maybe a small company needs to be able to have some seed funds. We'll have smaller investment within the company. We have a board seat. We can help advise them. And if it makes sense to be continued partners or maybe acquire down the road, that's definitely an important strategy. And I think particularly within India and other markets around the world, that's going to continue to be an interesting area. The other part is that we're building out capabilities in digital to enable small startup companies to qualify their application. And then as we build out more SaaS models, to be able to have them, if you will, have our own kind of application store be a part of that. And we would obviously, from a monetary standpoint, take a small percentage of that, but that would give a tool set and another way for them to get their application on our 4 million pieces of equipment or a couple billion patients that we touch in a given year. So multiple different approaches, but thinking about ecosystem more so than just owning, but partnerships to create more value is what we're thinking about.
So in the longer term context, I don't know, in the coming 3 years, 5 years, think of this as a reporter's question. Does it make sense to list Wipro GE in India?
So, look, a lot of times people ask me those questions about, and you can imagine there's other markets around the world that one would ask you that. And, the question is, if you monetize it for what? We've got our own balance sheet now. We've got significant amount of value. The other side of this is you do more in India for the world. Having that actually be a organization that feeds the whole planet, candidly, for technology and capabilities is more of where we're leaning. There's clearly scenarios where monetization could make sense. But part of this is for us is that there's so much, you can't be manufacturing in, the same product in 30 places. You want to choose some bases to do that. And I think having that type of capability and owning it at this point in time is how we're thinking about it.
Can you briefly give us a sense of, say, a decade down the line, and I would imagine a lot of the initiatives that are started today will take that kind of time to really mature. So in terms of your global manufacturing R&D capabilities, roughly what proportion would you say would come from India? And I know a lot of these projections can be completely off because so many things can change.
Yeah, look, I think, if you play it out 10 years, first of all, the big picture would be I think you're going to be seeing, the amount of digital solutions that GE HealthCare offers is going to be a more prominent driver of value and capabilities than even the equipment. So I think that's the first part, which gets back to a development area and capabilities here in Bangalore that will be playing a significant role. I mean, that will be a critical role driving that. The handheld ultrasound we talked about maybe earlier, I hope that you would go into a clinical office in any Western city or any city around the world, and you would see access to it. I hope that in the African countries that it becomes a predominant tool to getting to folks that don't have care for many. And then many of the products such as theranostics or drug delivery integration, I think we're going to see vast advancements in how to cure cancer, deal with advanced cardiovascular disease. And I think in India, we're going to go up significantly. What that number is, I don't know. I would say it's probably going to be more about how much we think today about hardware and how many more hardware items are made, but the value generated here from R&D, IP, as well as manufacturing. But in a world where your company is going to become even more SaaS and software, the value creation is going to be more around the correlation of that value that's created. But I think, we're going to go many X-folds larger just on the equipment side than we are today. And, the announcement that we made that we're having $1 billion, invested over the next 5 years, put it in perspective, we roughly were in the 4-year window of investing $4 billion over the last 30 years. So that's really the minimum of where we are, and I think you're going to continue us to see to go faster. What determines do we do higher investments really will come down to how government policy, how the supply base, and how those capabilities mature. If they mature faster, I think we probably move and advance faster because, again, of the confidence that we've had of doing business here for 35 years.
And this all said, can you give us a sense of, from GE HealthCare's perspective, what is still missing in the Indian broader ecosystem, or what needs work?
Well, I think, from an in India, for India, obviously this move from maybe only small single-digit percentage of people with insurance to now I think you're in the 10 to 14 range in that area. Obviously that progression is going to only continue to help. Bringing more care to the interior or less big metropolitan areas into smaller hospitals. I think that's going to continue to help all people within India. And it's going to then help us as a company to be able to match the right devices and capabilities to get there. I think when it comes to bringing this to become more and more of a med tech manufacturing and R&D capabilities, it's really doing what some of the changes have taken place, the right incentives, simplifying the tax process, simplifying the direct investment capabilities, and then infrastructure, right? If you make something in Hyderabad or Mumbai and you want to, make another component in Bangalore, how easy it is to connect those, how easy is it to integrate your supply chains. All the things that have been already started to be focused on, if they can be continued and advanced at a faster level, I think it's going to play to significant advantage.
Can you tell us a bit about yourself in terms of how you got interested in the healthcare industry and tech, where you've spent decades? Yeah,
it's always an interesting question. I didn't really seek it out as much, but I've always been, I grew up a family of immigrants that immigrated to the United States. My grandparents did, and purpose was important. And you can do a lot of exciting things, but there's not much higher purpose than helping someone else. And so I didn't go to med school, but I went and was more of a technology and management type person. And I actually got a call from someone about a job to join a company called GE Medical Systems at the time, back in the early 1990s, actually 89, 90. And I didn't even know GE had made medical equipment. And that's when my journey started. And the combination of unbelievably interesting technology, right? Think about a CT scanner in the day. You could see in the body without opening it up. And at that point in time, there was the term called exploratory surgery, which is unbelievable today. No one does exploratory surgery because you can see in the body through all the imaging. And that got me hooked. And then, the opportunity to kind of be able to advance very interesting business capabilities was what brought me there. But purpose is what keeps me coming back. That's the great part about what we have a humbling honor to do every day.
So I suppose if one finds that purpose, it feeds into one's personal growth. And at some point, even in my own work, I'm finding that career growth, personal growth, it all kind of gets mixed into one.
Particularly in today's world.
Yeah. So in your own personal growth, if you will, what are you looking forward to in the coming years?
Well, I tend to be, to the detriment of my technology teams, a little bit overly curious, particularly when it comes to artificial intelligence. I'm very enamored by the positive possibilities within healthcare. When you think about, in a given hospital system, 95% of the data they collect is really never used again. And if you could mine that in the appropriate ways, what that means. You have to go to one of the best centers in India to get the best care. It's really no different anyplace else in the world. If someone in the middle of the United States or in Eastern Europe, if you're not by one of those centers or one of those best doctors, with the promise of AI and how that can actually help diagnose, you could get a diagnosis somewhere in a very rural area that's just as effective as one in an urban area. So I just think the changes that are coming and that interest piece for me intellectually is very exciting, and how that again connects back to delivering on our purpose.
Okay, excellent. Peter, anything that you'd like to add or highlight in the small context of this brief conversation?
Just to say that, look, I think GE HealthCare, our whole focus is really about kind of thinking about new ways to kind of change and deliver care. And, our business is, primarily based around imaging, and then has expanded into other critical care areas. And I just think what you think of us today and how we evolve the company over the next couple of years is going to evolve into even a more broader view of how we solve some of these disease state areas. And that India is going to be a very important part of it. It's going to be, if I were to project going forward, when you think about where companies will think about coming for med tech capabilities and engineering and software and manufacturing, India is about as well positioned as any market at any given point in time to be super successful.